everyone. I'm Megan with the I Believe podcast, and today we have Barbara Hill. And Barbara, I'm so excited to have you with us. If you guys remember, we have been posting about her new book, but Barbara, I'm going to let you intro the book because this is your baby. I want you to tell everyone all about it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Megan. Let me start with first introducing myself properly. Some people in the ocular melanoma community may know me. I've been around for many, many, many years and was a caregiver for some time. But as far as this book goes, I do want everybody to know I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not an MD. I'm a person who like everyone, has walked the walk of having to grieve and having to deal with loss. And so the book is really, it's not my story. I hope it's everybody's story. But to talk about the road through grief, let's look at it this way. You go into and there's sort of anecdotes throughout the book, which originated from having gone through grief more times than I wish to count from the time I was a little girl till just a few years ago. And so I sort of became inspired to start, journaling and writing things down. And the book itself came out of that. I'm neither an author, really. Well, I am now. But officially, that was never on the bucket list and was never something I had planned on doing. But as I started to look at my stories, whether it be trying to hold myself up in the face of grief or dealing with some type of new diagnosis or something like that, my stories kind of express my frustration. So as you read them, you might find them to be a little sometimes witty, sometimes like you can hear I'm annoyed, things like that. But what I did find was that there was actually science backing the experiences that I was having. So, for example, I opened the book early on and I talk about how after I lost my husband, people came up to me and said, oh, I know exactly how you feel. Or, I'm sorry for your loss, of course, is always appropriate. But knowing exactly how I feel, I would say, unless you've walked in my shoes, you probably don't know how I feel. And so I expressed that frustration. And then as I go on in the book, then, there had been research done that actually backed this up, that it's not unusual that we can hear these platitudes from people when we're going through loss. And they might not give us the comfort that we expect. Or, taking it another level, I talk about something called disenfranchised grief in the book. And this applies for whether someone has passed away or whether there are daily losses that you're dealing with. Maybe your significant other can't do certain things that you may or may not have been able to do at one time. So those are the kinds of losses that we talk about in the book. So disenfranchised grief, I like to tell the story of, if anybody knows me from the community way back in 2006, my boyfriend was diagnosed with ocular melanoma. And anyway, he had it for 6 years. And, thank goodness to organizations like this, because we just didn't have that back then. But he had it 6 years, and we ended up finding out it had metastasized and just waited too long. Because also back in that time, there were things that we didn't know, like when someone was going for scans, for example, after you were having clear after the first 3 months, then they'd stretch it out to 6 months, or further. Now we know, at least this is my understanding, that, we do scans more frequently. So we were in the middle of the scan schedule when it turned out that I had to take him to the hospital, and they gave us very bad news. And he asked me to marry him. Now, we had been together for 10 years. We were very much a family. And he asked me to marry him. And I said, well, wait a minute. Let's, why don't we wait and see if you're going to live another 20 years? He goes, no. 20 years, 20 days, whatever it is, let's get married. I said, okay. So we did get married. We got married at the hospital. And then he did pass away 3 weeks later. So circling back to the book, there was a friend of mine, who instantly became no longer my friend, when he said, "Oh, well, how long were you married?" And I said, "Well, we were a family for 10 years, but legally we were married, 3 weeks." And he said, "3 weeks? That's nothing. What are you crying about? Forget it." And so that is a really good example of disenfranchised grief. But there are other examples too, and someone else's story, may be a little bit different. There's also something, later on I talk about in the book. When you have loss of any sort, there's something called secondary grief. In my case, it was very personal. Like I said, we were a family, and I was a stepmother and a step-grandmother. Shortly after my husband passed, well, those relationships changed. And so the secondary loss was that, life of being a grandparent in my case. But it can be almost any kind of secondary loss. Like sometimes I hear that, couples may go out with other couples, and then after a while, you find that couples then they're inviting you as the solo person, and you're like the third or the fifth or the seventh or some odd number. And over time, that may, dissipate. You may not see those friends anymore. So those are called secondary losses. And so secondary losses can happen whether someone has passed or whether, you're just faced with certain things in your life and things are not the same anymore. So that's kind of the gist of the book and the kinds of things that we touch on.
Thank you so much for being here, but explaining that, because I think that when we hear grief, we just think grief is grief and we don't realize all the different parts of it. And I think just by touching on those and explaining them, it helps validate people's feelings that, hey, yeah, I do feel that, or yeah, I did notice that. So I just want to thank you for being here and talking about this with us. It's such a delicate subject, and we don't want to shy away from those. We want to,
Right.
We want to hit them head on because it's real.
So I talk about in the book, it's called The Road Through Grief, because the only way around it is through it. And culturally, unfortunately, at least when I was raised, and not even until a few years ago, did people even really face grief. Like society has an expectation that, okay, you grieve for a little bit and then it's over. And then you move on. And one of the key messages in my book, so now you don't even have to go buy it, is that grief doesn't end, no matter what. And guess what? The beauty of it is it doesn't have to, because you're going to learn to carry it forward. I expose a lot of myths about grief. Here, I just opened the book. Zip. That's good. And I just pulled out a note here. All right, the myth of the grief timeline. So I write here, I'm going to read this to you. There is no universal timeline for grief. Nope, not even a little bit. It's a myth. And I can't tell you how many times I've been given advice that started with variations of you should, you need to, it's time to, ending with variations of move on, get over it, feel better by now. So I'm sure that's resonating with a lot of people. People telling us what we should or we shouldn't do. And so I'm here to say there's really no timeline for grief. It's going to take as long as it takes. And the truth is, it's forever. We do come to a point, and, it's way down the road where we really learn to carry it with us. The memory of that person becomes greater than almost the feelings of loss. We always miss that person, no matter what. I still miss the person I talk about in the book when I was 13 years old. But when I think about him now, I can smile. In my husband's case, I've been able to, do things in his memory, support causes that maybe were something that he believed in. Certainly, I'm a very big proponent of supporting health-related causes and people that support people, whether they're caregiving or experiencing a specific illness. Because in my lifetime, I talk about a loss that I had 39 years ago, and that was my sister. And since then, and the last 38 years, the illness that she had has come such a long way that something she was dreaming about, a certain type of surgery, was in the National Enquirer back in like the 80s. Like, Martians and kidney transplants is what it was. Or I'm sorry, pancreas transplants. And so it was really like, science fiction and National Enquirer gossip, kind of made up news. But she followed up on all of this, and nonetheless, it was about 15 years ago, and I'm watching the news, and there's a 14-year-old girl who just had a pancreas transplant and was off her insulin. And so I'm thinking, okay, it's been like 15, 20 years. And in that span, because of maybe the donation I made or because of the walk I participated in, whatever it is, look at this. This girl has a new life. And it actually brought tears to my eyes. And the tears really weren't for like, oh, too bad my sister didn't have that. But it was more like, isn't that fantastic what progress has been made? Even in our community, I see it a little bit differently. Like back when my husband was diagnosed, we didn't know a lot about genetic testing. And I think that would have revealed a lot to us at the time. But anyway, back to the book. So we talk about the grief timeline. We talk about moving on, getting over it, and all of that. And I wrote Conquering the Myth of Getting Over It. And I wrote, I remember feeling relieved, maybe even a little empowered, when I realized that getting over it and moving on are not necessarily required.
I love that.
And I'd like to say that, I was so glad to know that, because it helps me in the life that I have now. He's not gone, or my mother's not gone. Their memories live on. And this book, the way I outlined it, and in my experience, I continue to honor all these people in different ways. That's the beauty of it. You can take on projects, like I said, whether it be, fundraising for a cause, or doing something in somebody's memory. I used to talk to some various community groups and cancer support organization about the benefits of their bereavement programs and things like that. But I'd get up and I'd publicly speak. So, it's not that I have 10 million hours in the day. It's that it was going to help other people. And so that's the inspiration for this book, no matter where people are in the grieving process.
Aura Biosciences is a clinical stage biotechnology company focused on developing precision therapies for solid tumors that aim to preserve organ function. Our lead candidate, Belsar, is currently in late-stage development for primary choroidal melanoma and in early-stage development in other ocular oncology indications and bladder cancer. Our mission is to grow as an innovative global oncology company that positively transforms the lives of patients. For more information, please visit us at aurabiosciences.com.
Whether it's, somebody just passed away, or whether somebody's super sick and you don't know what's next. The one thing I do want to acknowledge is, as a caregiver myself, there's a lot of grief throughout that process. And there's a lot of attachment, like a roller coaster. And that period during caregiving is very much like the grief path, is that it's up and down. We're attached to doctor's visits, what's he going to say, that kind of thing. So it is very up and down. And the caregiver doesn't always talk about disenfranchised grief. When we're actively in the role, sometimes people aren't really recognizing what we're going through because our whole focus is on that person. And I would have never had it any other way, and I don't know anybody who wouldn't. But in hindsight, looking back, I do realize none of it was ever about me. So I remember somebody actually said to me recently, she was talking about her mom faced with a cancer, and then another very close friend of hers who's very sick. And she was very upset with her mother because her mother wasn't doing the things that she feels her mother should be doing to get herself to be better, to feel better, and all of that. And And I had a similar experience when we had an appointment set up with a researcher, like in the 11th hour. And my sister and I were ready to carry my husband into New York City. And he said, I don't want to go. And so I said, well, you do understand if we don't go, then you accept the diagnosis we got here at the local hospital. He goes, I understand that. So relating back to the woman I was speaking with who, her mother, and she wants her to be doing things differently and taking better care of herself or different care or getting certain treatment. And it just came out of my mouth, but it was kind of profound. I said to her, I loved him more than I wanted my way. And I think caregivers can get that because you absolutely put so much of yourself into that person. And I can look back and say I have absolutely no regrets. And he's not the only person I've been a caregiver to. And I would do it the same way over again. And so the thing to think about is that we do put them before ourselves, but we think about what their needs are and what they want and honor that. And so then turning that around to ourselves, thinking about what we need and we want. And at the end of the day, this book says it's okay to grieve, and you're going to get to a point where you're going to own it. It's yours. And so that's the message that I really want people to take away, that yes, it's okay to grieve. Yes, there is light at the end of the tunnel. It's not the light we want, but it's the light we have. And there is light. And the reason we get there is because we've come to discover, because we don't have to let go. We don't have to forget about that person, and we don't have to move on. So I hope this resonates with a lot of people.
Oh, I definitely think it will. I think a lot of the things you've said, whether you're the patient or the caregiver, it's just that empowerment of these are my feelings and I'm allowed to have my feelings. And I do want to ask you your opinion on something. When you talk about the grief timeline, do you feel like the people who are telling you what you should do, that it's more their emotion coming into it of like, you should be better by now because I need you to be better, because I need you to go back to being my friend the way you used to be? Do you feel like it's more coming from their external need than them realizing your internal need? Does that make sense?
It 100% makes sense.
Do you feel that?
And, it's exactly what it is in part. I also find sometimes people don't know what to say or do, or maybe they're just done with it. Like, it's time for them to move on. One thing I do address in the book is how relationships can change. And it's okay to let go of relationships, because somebody may not be there for you in the way that you had hoped. I also talk about another concept interesting. I call it the 3-month mark. And so a lot of people I've spoken to, they're like, oh my God, it's like before you know it, it's like a couple months later, and where is everybody? And so I call that the 3-month mark. Whether that's a hard mark, I'm not sure, but I think there might be some credibility to that. So what happens is, people are calling in the beginning and all coming around in the beginning. And then, like I say, like the lasagnas aren't coming as frequently and all of that. And you suddenly find like, where did everybody go? So it all ties into people maybe not knowing what to say, people liking it the way your relationship was before. You are changed forever. When anyone goes through any kind of loss, it changes you, whether profoundly or in some small way, you're definitely changed. And so, people want it the way it was. It maybe won't be that way anymore.
Castle Biosciences is a proud sponsor of this I Believe podcast. Castle's innovative uveal melanoma tests provide valuable information about the risk of your eye cancer spreading to help you and your healthcare team individualize the management of your disease. To learn more, visit castlebiosciences.com.
We've talked about people saying moving on or you need to be strong. And I want to tell you what I think about the word strong. So when you think of strength, you think of, going to the gym. Strength is, you do something building resistance to make you strong. You equate that to grief, resistance. Well, what you resist persists. And at the end of the day, are you really facing your grief? People on the outside looking in and go, oh, you're so strong. Oh, and you're thinking sometimes, I'm ready to fall apart. Or, and I tell stories where I like run off into an elevator just to get away from somebody so they don't see me burst into tears. But one of the things that I found by being willing to go through the road through grief, or being able to face grief head on, is we discover something that has been in ourselves already, but until it's really put to the test, do we even know what it is sometimes? And what surfaced for me was a phenomenon which I call resilience. Very different from being strong is being resilient. So we talked about resisting with strength, but with resilience, we talk about bending and flexing. By going through grief, by facing it head on, it's not going to be fun. It's going to be bumpy, sometimes smoother than others. But we develop this resilience that suddenly becomes part of who we are. It was always there, but it never had to surface to the degree when you were faced with grief or any challenge, really. So that's one of the beauties of going through grief. Like I said, you're going to do it in your own timeline, in your own way. You're going to own it, and you're going to become empowered with the freedom that you have now to be able to grieve, and the resiliency that makes you a new person. It's been a lot of years for me that I've experienced grief, as anybody of any age. By the time you hit a certain age, sure, you're going to lose a lot of people. But I'm able to face it differently now. And it's more of that. So I can remember when my sister passed away. We were still pretty young. And it was really hard to deal with that. And I remember being, numb for quite some time. I would say years, until I, imploded. Then I go many years later, my mother, and I knew what was coming. My sister calls it anticipatory. No, she calls it preemptive grieving. I don't know whether that's a thing, but there is anticipatory when you know something is coming. But the other thing is more so than that. Like with my mother, it was my willingness to be with her and willingness to face it. So when we're willing to feel those feelings and be present to what's actually going on around us, that's where we come out ahead. That's how we come out as that new person that we always were. But, now faced with things that are more challenging, we come out more on top. Let's just say that. Okay.
I love that. Yeah, no, that's such a good way to look at it, because if you do bury it down and suppress it and just pretend you're fine because people tell you you should be fine by now, that's really just going to manifest in your body and cause, stress and maybe even physical health issues. We don't really know. Like we know it's connected, but we don't know the exact science, right? Yeah. So you don't want to swallow it because people are telling you need to. And I love all of your points about that and really empowering people that it's theirs. They can own it. I think that's the most important thing about this book, is that you're showing up for all of these people and saying, hey, I see you and it's okay. And it's what you're supposed to do. And yeah, for all the people that are telling you how to feel, that's not because that's how you're supposed to feel. That's because that's how they need you to feel, because they want you to be done with it so they can go back to how it was. But like you said, you can't go back to how it was. So I love all of your messages. I think this is so important.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think that, grief has been kind of a taboo topic. And, like you said, it's becoming a little more acceptable to talk about, but it's still, people get very uncomfortable.
The first time anybody wrote or authored anything about it's okay to grieve was probably around 2017, and it was way after my husband died, so it wasn't a resource for me. And until I did the research on this book, it was already written, but I was backing it with research. Did I even know there was anything else out there that said it's okay to grieve? the difference between this book and another one maybe written by a psychologist or somebody else is that, I really put myself out there very vulnerably. I tell stories about myself, and I could probably to some people look like a loser in certain situations or whatever it is. But then, Dr. So-and-so says this. And so, the person reading it, maybe they had a similar experience. Like one person was reading it and it's like, she's going, yep, that's exactly what happened. That's how I feel. And another woman I know who, so she was with her boyfriend for 10 years, and it was actually several years ago, he suddenly passed away. And now, so it's like, I think it's like 7 years now, and she just remarried, and she picked up this book, and she said, I didn't even know I needed this book. I thought I was going to read it and pass it to my friend, but it's the kind of thing that you go back and you reread. And she's reading, she goes, I'm so angry at your neighbor right now. It must have been an incident. My neighbor said, I thought you'd be over this by now. I'm sure it was something like that, because there's so much of that in this book. But anyway, so what's nice is it is a companion. You can refer back to it, and maybe at one point you'll identify with the stories. At other points you might think, boy, that Barbara, she's really out there. But again, the whole book, it's anecdotal. I put myself out there. It's on my sleeve. Heart is on my sleeve. And, while I don't wish those stories for anybody, if you do have similar stories or you do have similar feelings, I want you to know that you're not alone. And there is a whole chapter, by the way, you mentioned on health. And there is a whole chapter on how it can manifest in your body, and it's wild. It's a wild ride.
It is, and I totally agree. And I mean, there's so much talk about how your mental is connected to your physical, and we've done episodes on it on this podcast also, that if you swallow that, you're swallowing poison. So you've got to process it and get it out. And it's so easier said than done. I mean, obviously we can sit here and say that all day long, walking, it's different, but don't be afraid of it.
Right. Exactly right. Is there anything else I can answer for the group today, do you think? Or
I think the biggest thing is just giving that reassurance that you are allowed to feel your feelings and own it and carry it. I think is just so empowering. And I love, love, love your whole message for our community. And I encourage anyone to go buy a copy of your book or buy it for a friend, because, wow, I mean,
thank you.
How empowering. We're going to link everything in the show notes. So go ahead and tell us everywhere we can find you.
Sure.
And then I will link it all.
My website is www.barbarahillauthor.com. And that will take you to the Road Through Grief website with links to Facebook. Hashtag the Road Through Grief will get you to Facebook. Instagram is barbara.hill.author, and you'll find me that way. I can provide you with a link directly to Amazon, which right now Amazon has an exclusive arrangement with me. So it's available in paperback, in Kindle, and also Kindle Unlimited. So you can just go to Amazon and search The Road Through Grief, Barbara Hill.
That's so exciting. I will link all of that in the show notes.
It's going to be a road, a windy road through grief. And sometimes you're like moving along and thinking you're doing great. And then suddenly you have a setback. And here, I'm just going to read you this one thing. It says, after some time had passed, I found I was able to hold myself up in the face of deep grief. But then, out of nowhere, just when I think I have my footing, a song, a sound, a scent, a place takes me down and wipes me out as if no time had passed. Kind of back to the beginning, like spiral staircase, and, back down.
Like Chutes and Ladders. You know how Chutes and Ladders, you go up and you come down?
In this book. That's actually referenced Chutes and Ladders without saying Chutes and Ladders. It's in there. And then, so I'm going to share with you some of the final thoughts. I'm going to, spoiler alert, but it's worth a read if you know this is the outcome. One, there's no set timeline for grief, regardless of what someone may have told you. Grief doesn't end, and we don't have to move on. We never have to accept our loss, but we can learn to live with it. Through grieving, resiliency becomes part of who we are and can empower us in many areas of our lives. Love lives on even after death. Joy and grief can coexist. And grief doesn't end, but neither does our bond. The memories can live on.
Oh, I love it so much. Thank you so much, Barbara, for being here, taking the time to talk to us, and thank you for telling us so many of these wonderful takeaways. And I absolutely encourage everyone to go buy a copy of the book. And tell us one more time the full name of it.
The Road Through Grief, Embracing Love and Loss.
That's the perfect name. I love it.
Thank
All
you.
right, everyone. We will see you all next time. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you feel compelled to buy a book or go visit Barbara's socials, please check the show notes. They will all be linked there. Please leave her a comment, a review, anything like that would be lovely. And please follow all of our socials. You could find us on Instagram, Facebook, probably most of the rest of them. And also go to our website, acureinsight.org. There's a button up at the top to subscribe to our newsletter. We would love it if you do that. We send a monthly newsletter that has all of the information that we feel is important to the community, as well as some other little tidbits. And then we also have a Tuesday night Zoom meeting. Please come and join that. We post the links on our socials. It's also on our website. And that's just a support group. It splits into two groups, regular and metastatic, so you can come and meet some other Ohmies and have some connection. And until next time, we just want to give you all the biggest thank you and send you all a great big warm hug, and also a huge thank you to all of our sponsors, because none of this would be possible without our wonderful sponsors. They're so gracious to help us bring this free education to you. So please tune in for our next episode, and we will see you all next time.